Hello everyone, Garrett from the Music Zoo here with Jordan.
What's up, everyone?
My old friend from the Music Zoo. And we are going to have Mike Venezia from Taylor Guitars showing us around their factory today to highlight some of the most crucial elements of the ways they build guitars.
All right, so right outside the Taylor factory, we have these couple of tents with a whole lot of wood. Mike, you want to tell us what this wood is doing hanging out here?
Well, it's hanging out because it needs to start drying out. So obviously wood comes from trees. Trees we grew with over the years with soil, sun, and water, and we've removed all of that, right? But when you first take a tree out of the ground or cut it down, it's what's called green or wet. And that means it still has a ton of moisture inside of it. So what we do is we get it cut down to blocks. These are going to be future necks. So this is mahogany. And we cut this down, and then we have it sit outside in these tents here at Taylor Guitars to acclimate to the environment and remove the excess moisture. So over time, more moisture evaporates out of these pieces of wood, out of these big blocks of wood. And when they're sufficiently dry enough, we'll bring it into the milling department. We'll add humidification, remove humidification, and do that multiple times. In essence, seasoning the wood. That's called seasoning the wood, or training the wood so that it becomes far more stable when it's cut into a guitar. If you took a wet piece of wood like this and fashioned it into a neck, I guarantee you, in a short period of time, that neck will go from straight to looking like a pretzel.
Right, because it still thinks it's like a tree almost.
It still thinks it's a tree, exactly.
Yeah. Is there like a specific amount of time that the wood hangs out in here, or does it depend on the species or where it came from?
It really depends on the species and where it originated from, both of those things. So if it's coming from, just as an example, like Indonesia.
Right.
Indonesia is a very, very wet environment, 70–80% humidity all the time. It's going to take longer than something that may come from North America or even South America for that matter.
Right.
Anything equatorial is going to be far more wet, in essence. And the further away you get from that, the drier the woods tend to be, it seems, in general. So yeah, this will sit here for a period of time, and when we deem it appropriate, we're going to bring it into milling, start turning these, in particular, into necks.
It smells really good in here, but I think let's go check out milling.
You got it.
All right.
All right, so now we're in milling. It's a little bit loud in here, but it still smells pretty good. So tell us what's going on here.
Well, first of all, it smells amazing in here, and that's because this is where wood gets cut. You can look around and see all the different machinery that were, all different types of saws, planers, which obviously plane, as we learned yesterday when you guys came here. Saws, planers, sanders, things of that nature to start taking these particular pieces of wood down to size and the next level in production. Obviously, it goes through a lot more than that after this, but these are those initial steps. After it comes in from those tents, after it's dried and seasoned, now it starts to get cut.
Yeah.
And you can see here, with what we have here, these blocks of wood, they're all numbered. It matches up with corresponding numbers of other woods of shapes and sizes, and it all stays together.
Yeah.
The reason why is because we try to keep the grain pattern the same in all those stacks of wood, so it makes necks that are far more consistent, not just from an aesthetic point of view, but also from a stability point of view. And that's one of the main reasons why Taylor has such stable necks, is because we go through this extra step.
You want all that grain to go in the same direction,
Exactly.
all working together to be one super sturdy guitar.
100%. So you'll see that as things happen throughout the factory, those numbers, it's like 3 ply of wood right now. Then you'll see that there'll be a heel block incorporated into it and a headstock incorporated into it that come from these pieces of wood. They all stay together through the entire production process for the neck.
Very cool. It's important. Consistent. Onwards.
All right, guys. Now this is what we call the laser room.
Whoa.
And there's a lot of wood in here, though, and it smells even better. So now we're getting into several different species of wood that we use for tops, sides, backs, etc., and so forth. It's also where we start joining backs and tops over here.
Yeah, tell us about this machine over here. It's kind of a cool carousel looking.
Yeah, so these carousels are really, really cool. First off, the wood gets matched up by grain.
Right.
And then after it gets matched up, we need to glue it together, whether it be 2, 3, or 4-piece back, depending on the construction. What happens is, it gets glued up, put on the carousel, turned to the next level, glued up, put on the carousel, and by the time, what's at 12 o'clock? The wood's at 12 o'clock, get back around to 12 o'clock, everything is perfectly dry, you could take it out, start the next, and it's just a continuous process. We have a couple of those because, well, we make a lot of guitars here, so this is a continuous process that happens all the time here in production.
It's kind of like, as we're the third room so far, and they just get bigger and bigger, and like, just gets grander and grander. It's very cool.
It does in some ways, but we're about to go to a much smaller room right after this. But before that, you could see, again, all the different species of woods and different things that we do here happen right here in the laser room. We cut the tops. You're going to see a lot of tops and things of that nature in this room. Lots of different selections of wood, like we pick for customs, like you guys will do later, and we'll actually take some shots of that. But again, this is a huge room. But we're about to go to a much smaller one, and we're going to show you how the rosettes are actually put in on the tops of guitars.
Let's check it out.
All right. All right. We are now in the rosette room. So all that fancy pants stuff you see on guitars that go around the sound hole, it's called a rosette.
Right.
And it's made of different materials. Here's all the different materials that we use to inlay that. It is definitely an arduous and artistic process. We laser out the cutouts for the rosettes, but then everybody in here has to make sure that they inlay it, glue it, make sure it's right, clip it to size, so on and so forth. And we do that not just with rosettes, but with some purfling trim as well, depending on which guitar or what series.
You can see all the different materials. There's ivory, ebony, some other black fibers.
There's wood, and then there's other materials as well. So there's plastics, there's ivories, there's wood, and depending on what needs to go into each rosette, there's 3-ring rosettes, 1-ring rosettes, there's abalone, there's PowerShell, there's all different types of materials that can go into making a rosette, but it all depends on the aesthetic nature of the guitar that it's being used for.
Right.
So every series has a very unique look and take on what that is.
You can appreciate this because everything is being done by hand.
Everything's being done by hand in here. It's all being inlaid, as you can see right here. X-Acto knives are used a lot in here. And I remember when I went through the onboarding process, I think I walked out of here with about 3 or 4 Band-Aids on my fingers because I am clumsy and I can't do this.
Yeah, I'm keeping my hands in my pockets.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
Good too, yeah.
So that's what happens here in the rosette room. And then later on, we're going to show you binding, which is similar in the sense that we're using thin pieces of wood and other materials, but it's applied on a much different area of the guitar, rounding out the guitar as opposed to in the center of the top.
So Mike, could you explain to me what this bin of long red sticks is for?
Well, it is a bin of long red sticks. Let's move.
All right. So at the music scene, we often hear like Taylor guitars using a lot of robots, a lot of machinery, a lot of technology to build their guitars. But all I'm seeing walking around the factory are people doing work with their hands to finish these guitars.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And like I said, we have buffing machines, but that can only be about 80% of the process, right? So it has to be finished by hand. And what this gentleman over here is doing, he's buffing it out on the wheel by hand, taking out those extra bits, polishing it up to a high sheen, and making it even across the entire guitar. That's not really possible with the machines. We use the machines to take away a lot of the error that man makes when making a guitar. Now, Bob Taylor will say, you know, to somebody like that, saying like, well, your guitars are made with machines. He'll say, well, we have about 60 CNC machines and 3 or 4 buffing machines and 1,300 people. So obviously there's a lot of people involved in the making of our guitars. It is very much a hand-on process. We saw the rosette section. We're going to see binding later. Everything with the necks, everything gluing all the woods together, selecting the woods, all that's done by a person. That can't be done by a computer, a machine, or anything.
I agree. I mean, nothing beats a human eye when it comes to making a musical instrument.
Exactly.
Which is what we're seeing everywhere here.
Exactly. It started with human hands, it ends with human hands.
That's a good line. There we go. All right, so once again, I wish we had smell-o-vision. It smells really good in here.
It really does.
We got some necks forming over here, Mike. What's this end of the process?
Well, so now we've gotten to the point where we saw earlier where everything is stacked and set together to keep that continuity between the grain and the look and et cetera and so forth. And those numbers are now coming together in the sense of we're now starting to form it into a neck. So we do scarf joints on all of our necks where they're just glued here from the headstock to the main part of the neck, right? Mm-hmm. And then it gets put on this machine over here and it gets roughed out to a neck shape, more so than this. This is very blocky right here. But you could see that Mahogany is one of the main woods that we use for our necks. We also use maple on maple guitars, but then sometimes you get some really cool figured mahogany like this.
That's insane.
This is nuts.
Garrett, put this in your pocket. Put TMZ on that.
I'm sure that nobody would know that this was in your pocket.
It's a secret.
But yeah, this is, again, now we're starting to get to the point where the necks are starting to be formed. And again, that process is done by hand, put into a hydraulic press to stick together and glue together. This way, we're not holding it with our hands. You got to clamp it down,
Right.
but we have these gigantic carousels that we could do several necks at once in the same way. Then again, it gets roughed out. Then it goes through the rest of the process to be turned into a neck, as you can see over here.
Start to see some over here.
Yep,
Actually
exactly.
becoming necks.
So that's more towards the end of the process.
Right.
And in between, there's several other steps. Like here, we have this one. This is going to be a 12 string. So the neck has been put on. It's been roughed out into the shape of a neck. The heel block's been applied. And now it needs to go through our CNC machines to turn into something looking more like that.
Right.
But again, this doesn't just happen by machine, it happens by hand. All this stuff needs to be done by hand, glued together at first, evaluated, everything else done by hand, then maintained in the machines and make sure that it's doing its job right. And again, we use the machines, like I said, to take away the guesswork,
Yeah.
right?
So
When you
some
can
of
have
this-
something that cuts to within like 1/1000th of an inch tolerance and be that consistent every time, that's why Taylor is where we are, because of our consistency. You pick up a Taylor guitar, you know it's going to feel good.
Right. We saw some of this too yesterday, the shaping of the headstock by hand.
Exactly,
That was
so we're
pretty
going to
cool,
walk
too.
over there and show that.
Let's check that out next.
Yep.
There we go.
All right, so these machines right here, this is where we form the crown of the Taylor headstocks. So the neck is placed on here with these two as a guide, and then gets put on this machine that'll cut your fingers off in about 3 seconds.
Yeah.
I am not turning it on.
Nope.
I like doing this though because it was quite violent, but at the same time, it does it to a fine degree. So it just cuts out to this form using these templates, and then after here, we go to a spindle sander that smooths everything out on those edges so you don't have the rough edges. But this does the crown in no time at all.
That's super cool, yeah.
It's really cool.
Saw someone working on those yesterday.
So I just want to point out this is a gigantic crown for the Shaquille O'Neal signature model. So we're working on it. We're growing the headstock as we speak to make that into a Taylor guitar for Shaquille O'Neal.
It's going to be available at the music zoo.
Yes. Well, maybe not. Maybe
not.
I'm wrong. I'll have to check on that one.
We'll do one for a Nick.
Fair enough.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, great. Let's move on. So here is basically all the steps in the process that we go through of making a neck. Like we showed you before, this is where after
Right.
the headstock is, the scarf joints glued together, the headstock's on, it gets roughed out to this particular profile. Then this is what it looks like after we do the truss rod installation.
We noticed this yesterday. Tell us about these two metal splines over here.
It actually is extra support to help stabilize the neck even further. So again,
Yeah.
Taylor guitars are known for very stable, very playable necks. And this is another reason why. So it keeps the wood from shifting by stabilizing this portion of the neck down closer to the body of the instrument.
Did you know that? I didn't know
Yeah, past where the
Yeah.
truss rod affects.
Exactly.
That's cool. Yeah, I didn't know that before yesterday. That's a great feature.
Now this is a neck that's ready for binding on it. Still needs to be finished complete, but it's
Yeah.
ready for the binding. This is where you get ready for the heel block glue up. So that gets glued on right there. And the heel block is where two of the screws go in. We have another screw that goes here at the top. So it is a 3-bolt system bolting the Taylor necks on. And then this is the finished product. After it's all done, glued up and milled,
There it
this is a neck from a 300 series guitar.
That's the heel cap and all.
The
Yep, heel cap and everything,
Yeah.
yep.
This one's kind of cool. Here's a cross section.
Yep, that's what it looks
Cut
like.
in
We
half.
took it and ruined it.
It's a 3-string guitar.
Yes, it is a tenor guitar. No, it is not actually. This really is
No.
just a cross section of our 6-string necks. And you can see that we have some extra supports in here to
Yeah.
help stabilize, hold that ebony fingerboard in place. And then also underneath the fingerboard of every one of our guitars, there's an RFID chip. There's a corresponding RFID chip on the inside of the top of the guitar that it gets put on. So we could follow the process of the neck and body throughout the factory. It all matches up in the end.
Super smart.
Cool.
See all the beautiful inlay options
Yep.
down below.
Exactly. So these are all different steps of the inlay. First, what we do is we actually use the CNC machine to route it out. Then we inlay and we glue it in, and then it gets sanded off, and at the end, it might look something like that.
Beautiful.
I like that.
Yeah.
And it depends on, you know, the materials that are used, you know, the process that you use to
Abalone, the
cut this
Ibroid,
in, all that.
pearl.
Exactly. And of course, different materials for different series, so on and so forth. There we go.
All right, so it seems like we're still in the neck department, Mike. What's going on over here?
Well, like I said, everything gets cut by a machine, the CNC machine, to get cut to the proper profile and shape, but then it needs to be finished up. So what's happening over here, we got some necks that are being hand sanded, taking off all the extra burrs off the headstock, off the neck itself, and being smoothed out, cleaned off. That way it could be assembled onto a guitar, finishing the whole thing up.
Cool.
Now these right here, they're going to be special guitars that you'll learn about soon enough.
All right. It's pretty cool. It's efficient.
Yeah, it's very efficient. See, so you can see how the CNC machine is just gently cutting those necks to within that tolerance, that thousandths of an inch tolerance.
Yeah.
And you're talking about heavy duty machinery with a lot of horsepower behind it, doing these very delicate
gentle.
things. It's amazing technology. But again, these are things that we use to take the guesswork out of it. We know that when these necks are done, and as you can see, the ones that are done on the left-hand side, they're done. They are clean. They are neat.
Yeah.
The ones on the right are still being cut, getting that heel block done up right now. Then it's going to finish the rest of the profile of the neck. Again, delicate work done by heavy machinery.
It's amazing.
Amazing technology. So let's move into binding. So over here, this is binding, and it's all done old school, if you want to call it that. It's all done by hand with, you know, your binding materials, masking tape, and glue.
Yeah.
And right now, I think he's at the end of the process. This is all done up, ready to go. Fine-tuning it and making sure that everything is aligned. There's no spaces. If there's any excess, it's being cut off. If there's anything needing to be scraped, it's coming off, making sure everything is level and flat. But again, it's an old school process on modern day guitars.
Yeah, all done by hand.
All done by hand. Yep. And so you can see what he's doing here. He's just finishing off the top, making sure everything is flat and even, using finer sandpaper, making sure the rosette's flat, making sure the binding is flat, everything is even on the top of the guitar, everything is flush. So, you know, again, these are the things that have to be done by hand. You can't just have a machine do that. It won't be consistent in that respect. It's kind of ironic, right?
Yeah.
But when you do it by hand, you actually can feel it. A machine can't feel if it's smooth.
Right.
It just knows what you put into it. This, we're able to touch it, see it, smell it, because you guys like smelling the wood, and seeing all that at work, that hand craftsmanship. This is why Taylor is who we are. Again, it's that marriage of technology and hand working that really makes these guitars shine.
Yeah, we
You all
agree.
are very tactical with which process yields the most consistent result with each method.
Yes,
As far as
exactly.
like what machine will yield a consistent result at a specific point in the process, and which point in the process a human touch would yield the most consistent
Exactly.
results.
And even with some of the human portions of it, there's some technology involved. Like we have these vacuum holders right here. So when he puts it on there, he turns on the vacuum, it sucks it down. This way it doesn't move as he's doing his work.
Wow.
Because the last thing you want when you're scraping,
Guitar,
binding,
yeah.
or fixing things is for the body to go moving away.
Move over, yeah.
Because you're one X-Acto knife away from ruining a guitar.
Right.
So there's a lot of precision that goes into all of that. And it's a repeated process. These guys are pros at it. Absolute pros at it.
Super cool to watch. You really get an appreciation coming to a guitar factory or Taylor guitars and seeing how much attention to detail there is and how delicate each process is.
Yep, 100%. And again, without the people, we are nothing. You know, we can have machines all day, but if there's nobody to actually touch the darn things and finish them by hand and assemble them by hand and bind them by hand, rosettes by hand, pick out the wood by hand, glue the woods together by hand, you got nothing.
Yeah.
So,
It's humans building them and humans playing them.
exactly.